All right, cool. Welcome to the Meetup Grants final report presentation. My name is David. I've been running the Meetup Grants program for the last couple of years now. Yeah, let's dive into it. I want, by the end of this presentation, everybody to understand a few things, how the program was run, what the results were of the program, and then just generally what some of the insights were and some of the wisdom that we gained. So if anybody is trying to relaunch a similar program, uh, those lessons aren't just lost into the void. And so yeah, let's begin. So the original idea behind the Meetup Grants program was to make it easier for passionate community members to hold educational meetups around the world. The Maker protocol is very much a global technology, and it's not a service or a tool that's limited to a single place on Earth. I think one of the really big, promising, and attractive things about this whole industry, DeFi, is the fact that it is a global industry, and people who don't have access to similar traditional versions of these services can have access to them through DeFi. And so, yeah, this meetup program was to help get exposure and get people to actually do these educational events around the world. And we had three objectives with this program. So first off, we wanted to incentivize new organizers. I don't know if any of you have held an event, but it's not always super easy. It's kind of intimidating for a lot of people. And so yeah, incentivizing new organizers as opposed to ones that have been around forever. Uh, that was a priority. Another objective was having a large number of countries actually have events rather than just funding events in like the US and Europe and kind of where all the developer uh, activity at least is happening. But we really wanted to extend this out to as far as possible, basically. And the third main objective that we had was basic user and contributor acquisition. So the Maker protocol has a number of different user types: DAI users, Vault users, um, and also it relies on its contributors. It's a public protocol, and at the time and even now, the community is growing, and so being able to acquire competent, talented contributors was also pretty high on our list of objectives. And so, yeah, let's get into a little bit about the operations for how the program actually ran. So I kind of split it into two buckets. So there were static resources that were created for the program in addition to the actual application process. So those static resources consisted of a handful of guides, and this actually played on that first objective that I spoke to. Of actually attracting new organizers. So we had a getting started guide, we had an event formats guide, we had a budget guide, and we had a promotion guide. Uh, and these four guides were updated, I think, a handful of times, also with the help of community contributors. Uh, and they really served as the foundational guides for a lot of the newer organizers. And then there was the application process itself. So this was after the actual initial resources were created, and as you saw, they were static, and they sat there. The application process was really the engine that was running the program for the rest of the time. Uh, and the process consisted of four basic steps. So there was an initial application that applicants had to fill out. Then I would so the operator, or being myself, would go through the application and issue a grant decision, and that either meant that it would be accepted and the grant would be paid out, or there it would be flat out rejected with no chance of it being paid out, or there was like a bit of back and forth trying to fix mistakes or get further clarity on details inside of the application. Then the third step was obviously the event itself. And then lastly, we expected organizers to fill out a feedback form. Uh, and and so the initial application kind of gave us a prediction about how many people were going to be at the event, what was in the event itself, and the feedback form gave us a readout of the actual results. At least that was the theory, right? Uh, so yeah. Uh, in general, once everything was set up, this program was pretty light to run. It took one person about 2 to 3 hours per week on average. Of course, as I'm going to mention later on in the presentation, there were definitely ways we could have invested more time and effort into this program, uh, which we didn't. But yeah, there is definitely room to grow uh, in that regard. So yeah, let's look at the data because we collected a bunch of it. As I mentioned, we had an initial application that all of our grantees filled out, which, as you could see, is about 240 applications. Uh, Only 194 of those were actually granted, but yeah, I'll get into that in the next slide. Uh, so yeah, let's look at the data. So this was our journey. In Q1 of 2019, we had our first meetup grant in February. During this time, these were when the guides were being written. Q1 a year later in 2020, that's when COVID hit and the program needed to pivot to support virtual meetups rather than just physical meetups. And then, yeah, Q2 of 2021, which is pretty much now, the program is coming to a close. Uh, and so, yeah, juxtaposed on top of this big journey, here's a chart of all of our applications, the blue shaded being, accepted and granted, the red being rejections. uh, and yeah, as you can see, that one big red uh, can I don't want to call it a candle because it's not technically a candle. uh, but yeah, Q1 of 2020 was really hard because of COVID. We had to reject a lot of applications and basically pivot. And since then, we've gotten back to our former glory in terms of like just the volume of applications and grants that we've been putting out. So let's get into some applicant insights. So overall, we had 122. Well, actually, let me preface this with some information. So there were actually 144 unique individuals that submitted applications, but of those, 22, they had all of their applications get rejected. So this is information that's just for accepted applications. So for accepted applications, we had 122 unique organizers, 93 of which held only a single event. 29 of those organizers held two or more events. And in general, the top seven organizers accounted for about 25% of the events. Uh, and this is really interesting actually, because looking at who the actual top seven were, I'm not going to list them by name. What I found more interesting was their country of origin. And in order, it went like this: it went Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda, Argentina, Uganda again, and Thailand. And those were the origins of the top seven organizers. And I found this interesting because all of these represent financially underdeveloped countries with natural demand for decentralized financial services and stablecoins. Uh, and so it was interesting to see that organizers from more developed countries tended to hold less recurring events on the whole. And it leads me to kind of believe that our events somewhat mirrored the demand that we could see globally for this kind of tech. You know, uh, in more developed countries, the interest is not actually in usage; it's more in like investing, right, and seeing how big this thing can grow. You know, we all have ways that we could do payments and send money to each other, and even yeah, there's we are a lot more privileged than many of the countries that were listed in this program that actually took advantage of this program. And so yeah, let's move forward. So the other thing is that tracking ain't easy. Earlier on in the presentation, I showed one of the objectives as being uh, our goal was to get more user and contributor acquisition. And in looking back at the program, yeah, tracking ain't easy. Unfortunately, it's really hard to know if individuals contributed beyond meetups. Uh, Outreach. But from what we did do, we looked at all the names and we looked at the individuals that were part of the events. And out of the 122 unique applicants, We found 6 of those organizers had actually contributed or done things beyond the meetups for MakerDAO. Uh, and yeah, just a fun fact. Majority of people, it's really hard to tell if they ended up becoming users. It's hard to tell if their attendees became users, and it's near impossible to tell if really any decent contributors. Not actually, that's the wrong way of saying it. It's really hard to tell. It's really hard to track everything, I guess, is my main point with the slide. And I'm not looking at the chat, so if there are any questions, feel free to jump in and interrupt me. So let's get into some country insights. These mirrored the applicant insights also in an interesting way. So read this as yeah, basically applicants all came from certain countries. So this is just the country view of the data. So 53, well, applicants from 53 countries applied. 49 of those countries actually had events. Unfortunately, 4 country applicants had their events rejected and they never reapplied. So we only had 49 countries that had actual events, which is a heck of a lot of countries. 23 of those countries had at least 2 events, and 27 countries only had a single event. This is the pie chart, kind of showing the visual of just where the exact to find out about the program and actually, participate in the program. And it turned out that a lot of the new organizers came as a result of referrals, and a lot of the early meetups happened in Ghana. One of the top organizers was actually a gentleman by the name of Sahabia, and he is a Ghana native, and he held, I think, something like 10 or 12 meetups. And from him, I think 6 or 7 different organizers were referred, and so we saw this kind of network effect happen over the life of the program, and so that is why I think African countries dominated, um, and also because of their natural position to be find utility in what it is. Uh, yeah, so getting into some other notes, not all of the insights are derived from data. A lot of it was derived also from experience and actually running the program and going through what we went through. Uh, and pivoting to virtual meetups, and trying to get complete data, and following up with organizers who wouldn't submit their post event forms, etc., etc. So there's kind of like uh, four notable things that I want to talk briefly about. So one of them was gathering data. Uh, After the events to get people to fill out those post-event form applications. And the way that we incentivized it uh, in our program is, you wouldn't be able to get a second grant for a second event unless you had submitted a post-event form for your original granted event. And this worked for repeat organizers, but unfortunately, 70% of the organizers did not come back. And unfortunately, this resulted in about a 55% rate of post-event form submissions, which means that ultimately our data is not as complete as we wish it would be. Uh, so yeah, there were different ideas for how to actually increase the likelihood that somebody would you know submit a post-event form. Uh, Unfortunately, we did not do enough, but yeah, hold on. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to pull up one note in particular about this. Uh, yeah, okay. Sorry. So okay, yeah, that's actually that's about it for that. Next, I want to talk a little bit just about physical versus virtual meetups. So physical meetups naturally had a lot higher quality to them. So people who posted, who submitted those post event forms, uh, you could tell by the difference, just the difference between the virtual and the physical. The physical usually had a lot more buy-in from the people that were actually attending the events. Virtual seemed to lack both an engagement and an actual attendance. Uh, and yeah, generally speaking, our recommendation for physical versus virtual is either don't do virtual at all, or if you do, raise the standards a lot higher than we had them. Uh, we had the initial application pretty much stayed almost the same for virtual meetups, but you know, if we knew what we knew now, if we knew now what we knew then, no, if we knew then what we knew now, sorry, a little bit of a brain fuzz. Uh, we would definitely raise the bar a lot higher for virtual meetups, and so that's our recommendation. As for low quality versus high quality meetups, obviously we wanted to incentivize and encourage people to do the highest quality that they can. Uh, and for the most part, like I would say 85% of meetups that we funded, were of sufficient quality that, we don't feel like our investment was for nothing. We don't feel like we just threw money at the wind. High quality meetups we defined as, meetups where the speaker and the crowd communicated really well. The speaker would, you know, uh, give relevant, man, what's the wording I'm looking for? Yeah, they would engage with questions. They would really teach. The quality is the quality. Yeah, the quality of the presentation should have been high, unique, contain interesting insights, etc. The organizer themselves should have demonstrated a good understanding of Ethereum and MakerDAO. And then, generally speaking, the audience should have been a, a fitting demographic, right? If you see a lot of like little kids in a classroom and you're talking about like high level financial software, it's a little bit of a misnomer, right? And low quality meetups were, events where they were being done in poor English rather than, a higher quality native language presentation. You could tell that those were like meetups that were really trying to appease the grantors rather than the people at the event. The quality of the presentation being used is low. Uh, there were rampant like misunderstandings about what Ethereum was and what MakerDAO was. Uh, and then generally speaking, yeah, audience mismatch. So that's kind of how we saw low and high quality. Uh, what we did was when post event forms were actually submitted, we graded those events on a scale of 1 to 10. And so of the 108 events that we graded, we found that the majority of them fell into like a 6 or a 7. So the total graded was about 108. The average quality of a meetup, yeah, 6.2. 88 events scored 6 or above, while 26 events scored 5 or below. So on the whole, events were a lot better than they were bad, which is really nice to know. Uh, and so yeah, moving forward, uh, creating lasting resources. So another goal that we had when we first started the program was that people doing these events would actually create resources, whether it would be like written, op-ed pieces or research pieces or presentations explaining the basics, but in a new way, videos of their talks, etc. We expected a lot more of that to happen than actually did. So of the 108 post-event form submissions, only 5 posted their talks on YouTube. You know, of those submissions, about 80 actually, included their presentation slides, and only 2 or 3 of those were original and reusable, and actually were added to our example slides, which was another resource that we had for new organizers that I didn't include on my earlier slide. Unfortunately, I forgot. Uh, And generally speaking, I could not identify any research pieces or articles that came out as a result of any meetups that this program funded. So, in hindsight, perhaps this objective would have been more fruitful if we invested more effort into working directly with organizers to produce these resources, whether through additional incentives, like getting a bonus grant for writing a paper or something like that, or just through just straight up more attentive outreach and saying, "Hey, like we really do want to see a good talk. We having more of an attentive outreach." So these and other ideas were never implemented, both due to a lack of time and priority. There were many MakerDAO talks, presentations, research pieces available online as it is. So this wasn't really seen as a major priority, though. Though in hindsight, uh, if a team were investing more into this kind of program, there's definitely ways to use it to create more lasting resources. And so, lastly, just to wrap up the presentation, I started off this report asking myself, did we succeed, and what was our impact? And it's important to know that success is not binary. It's not 0 or 1. It's very much a scale of 0 to 10. Uh, and so, could we have done better as a program? Absolutely. Did we succeed as a program? Absolutely. What was our impact? 9 quarters and 82,000 die later. Uh, it's difficult to make a clear assessment because MakerDAO naturally experienced significant development and growth since the launch of this program. But obviously, it can't be attributed to this program. Uh, you attributed a lot more to the developers and to the ecosystem that was naturally occurring already. This program sort of served as a boost. Uh, but in general, the first funded meetup was in March 2019. This was before the launch of multi-collateral DAI. At the time, there were 92 million DAI in circulation, and and that was the previous version of DAI. But since then, we're at 3.5 billion DAI now, uh, and all it took was 5.5 quarters. So it really, MakerDAO is a success unto itself. But as for the program, here's some things we could definitely point out. We put DAI in the hands of hundreds of people, the majority of whom live in countries with underdeveloped financial infrastructure. We gave those hundreds of people the chance to teach and expose thousands of people in their local communities to technology that actually has the potential to transform their society. And although the technology might not be completely ready for the masses, cough, Ethereum gas prices, cough, um, it's opening the door for when it will be. All of these communities are very, very much like our communities. At least I could say, the youth and the interest in technology and the competence. Like you could see that there's a lot of hunger. Um, yeah, there's a lot of hunger around the world for this kind of tech, and so I think that our program definitely is opening the door for when it's going to be ready for the masses. Um, so yeah, that is the brief overview for the Meetup grant program. And thank you. Any questions? Feel free to ask.